Hey everyone, and welcome back to episode 5 of How to Terrarium. This is a very special episode as this terrarium is truly unique. I'll show you how to make what I've decided to call a ship in a bottle terrarium. Of course there's no ship going in this bottle, but the overall style and look of this terrarium is inspired to look like, you guessed it, a ship in a bottle. Unlike other terrariums that we have done, this one is going into the expert category for a few reasons. Working in a space such as a bottle is much more difficult than what I have shown you thus far. This is because the opening is small, yet the container itself is relatively large. To accomplish this, you will need some specific tools, patience, and a steady hand. That being said, anyone can make a terrarium like this, it's just a little bit more difficult than what we've done thus far. You don't need anything too extravagant for this terrarium build. We will need a few scraps of wood, stain, polyurethane, sandpaper and wood glue, silicone, long tweezers or tongs, gravel and mesh, a suitable substrate, suitable plants, twigs and other natural accessories, and a suitable container. Let's begin by constructing our terrarium stand. Obviously yours will differ from mine accordingly. Therefore I'll explain how I made mine and you can tweak this procedure to fit your vision. Here's a basic blueprint that I did before making my measurements. It features two main elements, a baseboard and two posts used to support the bottle. Set the bottle next to what will become the baseboard. Use a sketch similar to mine to reference the angle of the bottle next to the board. Now mark the board and cut it to size. Again, place the bottle next to the baseboard in order to estimate the length of each post. After determining what is appropriate, measure the distance from the bottle to the baseboard. Now mark the boards and cut them to size. Next, measure and mark the center of the baseboard. From the center point, measure out half the width of the posts on either side. Now, place the posts on the base to determine how far they should be attached from the ends. Measure and mark the base and use the posts to finalize the marks. Finally, erase some of the lines. Now, put a dab of wood glue on the baseboard and firmly press the posts into place. Then lightly clamp the posts to the base. Measure the distance between your posts and cut a board to this length. Clamp it in between them without using glue. Now firmly tighten all of the clamps. Use a damp rag or paper towel to wipe off any excess glue. Let it dry for a few hours and then remove the clamps. I suggest giving your stand a light sanding with some fine sandpaper. Also, if you have a router, now is the time to give the stand a beveled edge. Now we are going to make a small divot on the top of each post. I was going to use a Dremel, but I realized that some people don't have them. Therefore, I'm using some coarse sandpaper wrapped around a spare PVC pipe. Depending on the type of wood, you shouldn't have to sand very much to achieve the right impression. Make sure to sand the same downward angle on both posts. Now let's test it out. As you can see, my bottle stays in place without even holding it. Here you can get a better look of how the divots should look. They are very subtle, but enough to hold the bottle in place. Finally, let's complete the stand. I applied 2 coats of my preferred stain, Provincial 211. It really brings out the grain and has a sophisticated look about it. As you can see, I made a rack using foam and nails. This is so that I can efficiently stain all the sides of the stand at once. Don't worry if the underside of the stand has imperfections, we won't see it shortly. Now add some polyurethane. I really like it to look thick and shiny, therefore I added about 5 layers. The same look can be achieved easier by using epoxy. The next part, however, is optional. After drying, you can cut a piece of felt to the dimensions of the underside of the stand. This will keep it from sliding around, but mainly adds a nice touch. I'm attaching it using rubber cement. I always put it on both surfaces, let it dry completely, and then bond them together. So now your completed terrarium stand should look something like this. I know it was a little bit of work, but trust me, it's so worth it. Now let's attach the bottle using some silicone. I suggest using a color that will blend well with the stand. I have 100% brown silicone here. After putting 2 generous dabs onto the posts, roll out some masking tape and place your stand over them. Now gently lower your bottle into place. If you get any silicone on your hands or mess up when lowering the bottle, just wipe off the silicone with a dry paper towel and try again. Use the tape to keep the bottle in place as you see here. Now get something to lean the bottle on so that it doesn't slide off the stand. Let your silicone dry overnight or slightly longer, and then remove the tape. If you want, go back and scrape off any excess silicone. Be sure not to cut into the seal though. As always, we are going to add a false bottom to this terrarium. Let's begin with the gravel. I was putting it in sideways to begin with, but I found that it was easier with the bottle standing up. Afterwards, lightly shake your bottle to get the gravel evenly dispersed. After adding the gravel, we are going to put in the mesh. I have mine pre-cut to fit right into the bottle. To get it in, I simply folded the mesh in half and stuffed it into the bottle's opening. I then used my tweezers to feed it through and put it into position. Next, I used a few pieces of gravel to keep it in place. Don't worry if your mesh isn't completely touching the gravel, the substrate will do the trick shortly. Now let's add the substrate. Follow the link to see how to make it for yourself. Since the soil is largely composed of sphagnum moss, it can be fed through in pieces. My best advice is to just stuff it through the opening and use your tweezers to move it around as you see here. After getting a good amount of substrate into your bottle, you can use your tweezers to form it in place. Finally, clear the bottle's neck of any debris so that we can easily feed our plants through. Now for the last and hardest step, we're going to add the plants and decorations to our terrarium. When doing this, it is easiest to start at the very end of the bottle and work your way back to the opening. It's always a good idea to envision or sketch how your terrarium will look before starting so that you end up with something that you will like. Simply use your tweezers and other tools to get the plants where you need them. Of course, that's easier said than done, especially when you're working with long tweezers. By this point, I was almost done landscaping, so I decided to clean the container and water it at the same time. Simply do a few sprays so that the water spreads over the glass while at the same time removing any excess debris. If necessary, you can remove any excess water by slightly tilting your bottle so that it pours out of the opening. Be careful when doing this though, as you might ruin your whole terrarium. As with most of my terrariums, I like to add springtails. That's what you see me doing here. They will eat any mold that will pop up and help keep the terrarium clean overall.